Barron Trump, the towering youngest son of America's most polarizing dynasty, stumbled into the wildest, most jaw-dropping scandal imaginable. A clash so outrageous, so drenched in controversy, it's already being hailed as the greatest showdown ever witnessed under the Hawaiian sun. What started as an astonishing act of compassion on a sun-soaked Maui beach spiraled into a mind-blowing tempest when a rabid Zelensky fan unleashed a torrent of accusations that shook the world. Something incredible happened, something so emotionally charged, so hilariously unhinged, it'll leave you desperate to know more. But the full truth remains cloaked in suspense, a ticking bomb of curiosity that promises to detonate with every twist. Buckle up for a roller coaster of privilege, passion, and pandemonium that's too explosive to ignore. The golden sands of Maui shimmered under a relentless Hawaiian sun, a sprawling canvas of paradise where turquoise waves crashed in hypnotic rhythm against the shore. Barron Trump, now 19 and standing an imposing 6'7", arrived here seeking a rare escape from the suffocating spotlight that had trailed him since birth. His lanky frame, draped in a crisp white linen shirt and khaki shorts, cut a striking figure against the backdrop of palm trees and luxury resorts, an enigmatic teenager whose piercing blue eyes seemed to search for something beyond the horizon. This was no political stage, no gilded cage of Mar-a-Lago. It was a sanctuary, a chance to shed the Trump name's relentless weight and simply exist. Barron's days unfolded in quiet rebellion against his legacy. He surfed the swells with surprising grace, his long arms carving through the water, salt spray glistening on his skin as he rode the waves like a man unburdened. Evenings found him wandering the beach alone, the cool sand sinking beneath his bare feet, grounding him in a way the marble floors of his childhood never could. The resort buzzed around him, tourists sipping cocktails, families building sandcastles, the air thick with sunscreen and laughter. But Barron moved through it all like a ghost, his height drawing fleeting glances, his presence a whisper that never quite settled. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation. And if you want to see how far it goes, subscribe now before it disappears. It was on one such evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fiery streaks of pink and orange, that fate nudged him toward a moment that would ignite everything. Near a bustling beachside cafe, where the scent of grilled pineapple mingled with the ocean breeze, a scrappy figure caught his eye. A boy, no older than 12, his sun-bleached hair wild and tangled, his clothes ragged and patched. The kid rummaged through a trash bin with practiced efficiency, his small hands sifting through discarded wrappers and soda cans, his face smudged with dirt yet alive with a fierce, untamed spark. Barron paused mid-step, his shadow stretching long across the sand, a flicker of something, pity, recognition, or perhaps a buried instinct, stirring within him. He approached slowly, his towering frame casting an almost protective shade over the boy, who looked up with a jolt, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Barron knelt, his movements deliberate, and reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled $20 bill, the last of his cash from a day spent drifting through this paradise. The boy's gaze darted between the money and Barron's face, a wariness melting into curiosity as the bill changed hands. A grin broke across the kid's dirt-streaked features, a flash of unguarded joy, and he clutched the money like a treasure before bolting toward the cafe, his bare feet kicking up sand in his wake. Barron stood, brushing the grains from his knees, a quiet satisfaction settling over him as the boy vanished into the neon glow of the eatery. The waves lapped gently at the shore, the sky darkened to a bruised purple, and for a fleeting moment, Maui felt like a world where kindness could simply be. But paradise is a fragile illusion, and unseen eyes had already locked onto Barron's gesture, their intent far from benign. From the shadows of a nearby palm grove, a wiry figure in his 30s watched, his face half hidden beneath a baseball cap emblazoned with the Ukrainian flag. Known online as Kyiv's Avenger, he was a digital crusader, a fervent Zelensky supporter whose obsession with the Trump family had festered into a near manic vendetta. His presence here was no accident. He tracked Barron's vacation through scraps of social media, his mind a tangle of conspiracy and righteous fury. To him, Barron wasn't a teenager on holiday. He was a living emblem of American excess, a target ripe for exposure. As the boy disappeared and Barron lingered in the fading light, the Zelensky fan's fingers tightened around his phone, a predator sensing the perfect strike. The Maui night draped the island in a velvet hush, the moon's pale glow casting silver ribbons across the ocean's restless surface. Barron Trump wandered back toward his resort, the distant thrum of waves a steady companion to his thoughts. His bare feet sank into the cool sand with each step, grounding him in the fleeting peace he'd found here, a peace now tinged with an inexplicable unease. The bonfire's warmth still clung to his skin, the locals' laughter echoing in his mind. But as he glanced over his shoulder, the empty beach stretched behind him like a void, the shadows too deep, too still. He shook off the shiver crawling up his spine, chalking it up to the chill of the night breeze, and quickened his pace toward the resort's golden lights. Unseen, the Zelensky fan trailed him like a phantom, his baseball cap pulled low, his footsteps muffled by the sand. His phone, clutched like a talisman, buzzed faintly with notifications, likes, shares, comments pouring in from his latest post. The video of Barron by the bonfire had already racked up thousands of views, his followers' outrage swelling with each passing minute. To them, Barron's easy smile was a slap in the face, a mockery of their cause. The Zelensky fan's lips curled into a grim smirk as he typed a new caption. "The prince laughs while the world burns. Trump privilege Ukraine bleeds." He hit send, the post vanishing into the digital ether, another spark tossed onto the growing inferno. Inside the resort, Barron slipped through the lobby, his towering 6'7" frame drawing the usual glances from staff and guests, though their smiles were polite, oblivious to the storm brewing beyond the island's shores. He rode the elevator to his suite, the hum of the machinery a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. The doors slid open to reveal a sprawling room bathed in moonlight, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the ocean like a living painting. He collapsed onto the bed, his long limbs sprawling across the crisp sheets, and stared at the ceiling, his mind replaying the day's events. The homeless boy, the bonfire, the fleeting sense of belonging. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a life untethered from his name, a life where he could simply be. But the world had other plans. His phone, resting on the nightstand, vibrated softly, its screen lighting up with a barrage of notifications. Barron ignored it at first, his eyes drifting shut but the insistent buzzing gnawed at his resolve. With a sigh, he reached for the device, scrolling through the alerts, news updates, social media mentions, texts from friends back home. One message caught his eye, a link from an old classmate, accompanied by a string of shocked emojis. He tapped it and the screen filled with a video of himself by the bonfire, the footage grainy but unmistakable. The caption twisted his stomach. "Barron Trump parties while Ukraine fights for survival. Is this what privilege looks like?" His jaw tightened, the peace of the night shattered by the sudden intrusion of reality. Meanwhile, the Zelensky fan slipped into a dimly lit internet cafe tucked away from the tourist haunts, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and burnt circuits. He hunched over a computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he uploaded more footage, each clip meticulously edited to cast Barron in the worst possible light. The cafe's other patrons, mostly locals and backpackers, paid him little mind, their own screens glowing with games and social feeds. But to the Zelensky fan, this was war, and every post was a salvo aimed at the heart of the Trump dynasty. His eyes burned with a zealot's fire, his mind racing with plans for the next day, a confrontation that would force Barron to face the wrath he'd so carefully curated. Back in his suite, Barron tossed the phone aside, his appetite for the digital circus soured. He rose and stepped onto the balcony, the ocean breeze tugging at his shirt, the salt air sharp in his lungs. The resort's pool glittered below, its surface rippling under the moonlight, but his gaze drifted to the beach, where the bonfire's embers still glowed faintly in the distance. He thought of the homeless boy again, wondering where he slept tonight if the $20 had bought him more than a fleeting reprieve. The contrast between his own comfort and the boy's struggle gnawed at him, a reminder that his name was both a shield and a cage. The Zelensky fan, his work done for the night, slipped out of the cafe and melted into the shadows, his mind alight with visions of the coming showdown. He'd chosen his battlefield, a bustling beachside market where tourists and locals mingled, a place where Barron's presence would be impossible to ignore. The plan was simple: confront him in broad daylight, cameras rolling, and expose him for the fraud he believed him to be. The thought sent a thrill through his veins, a heady mix of anticipation and righteous fury. He disappeared into the night, his footsteps swallowed by the sand, leaving only the faint hum of the cafe's neon sign in his wake. Barron lingered on the balcony, his hands gripping the railing, his knuckles white against the cool metal. The unease from earlier crept back, a whisper in the dark that refused to be silenced. He scanned the beach below, his eyes straining to pierce the shadows, but saw nothing amiss. Still, the feeling persisted, a prickling at the base of his skull, as if the night itself was watching. He shook his head, dismissing it as paranoia, and retreated inside, the sliding door sealing him from the world outside. But as he lay in bed, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above, sleep eluded him, his mind churning with the sense that someone was closing in. The night deepened, the island's rhythm slowing to a languid crawl. But for Barron and his unseen adversary, the game had only just begun. Tomorrow, under the unrelenting Hawaiian sun, their paths would collide, and the paradise they both inhabited would become a stage for a reckoning neither could escape. The Hawaiian sun climbed higher, its rays slicing through the palm fronds and casting dappled shadows on the bustling beachside market. Barron Trump, his cap pulled low and sunglasses shielding his eyes, moved through the crowd with a deliberate casualness, his towering frame weaving between stalls laden with vibrant fruits, hand-woven baskets, and trinkets that glittered in the light. The air was thick with the mingling scents of grilled fish, coconut sunscreen, and the salty tang of the ocean, a sensory tapestry that should have been soothing, but today it felt oppressive, the heat pressing down like a warning. Barron's mind churned with the events of the previous night, the viral video gnawing at his thoughts, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the simple act of blending in, of being just another tourist in paradise. Unbeknownst to him, the Zelensky fan was already in position, his wiry frame tucked behind a stall selling handmade leis, his phone clutched in one hand, a small camera discreetly mounted on his cap. His heart raced with anticipation, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of Barron's unmistakable height. He'd spent the morning orchestrating this moment, his followers primed and waiting for the live stream that would expose the young Trump to the world. The market was the perfect stage, crowded, chaotic, a place where Barron couldn't hide, where every word and gesture would be captured and dissected in real time. The Zelensky fan's fingers twitched, itching to hit the record button, his breath shallow with the thrill of the hunt. Barron paused at a stall selling fresh pineapple, the vendor's smile warm and inviting as she offered him a sample. He accepted, the sweet juice bursting on his tongue, a fleeting moment of normalcy that almost made him forget the storm brewing around him. But as he turned to leave, a voice cut through the market's hum, a voice sharp, accusatory, and laced with venom. "Barron Trump, enjoying your vacation while the world burns." The words landed like a slap, and the crowd's chatter faltered, heads swiveling toward the source. Barron froze, his hand still holding the pineapple skewer, his eyes narrowing behind his sunglasses as he spotted the Zelensky fan pushing through the throng, phone raised, camera rolling. The activist's face was flushed with righteous fury, his baseball cap askew, the Ukrainian flag patch gleaming in the sunlight. "You think you can just waltz around here, pretending to care, while your family's legacy fuels wars and suffering?" His voice rose with each word, drawing more eyes, more phones, the market's energy shifting from curiosity to tension. Barron's jaw tightened, his pulse quickening as he felt the weight of the crowd's gaze settle on him. He'd faced scrutiny before. His entire life had been a masterclass in enduring it. But this was different. This was personal, public, and primed to explode. The Zelensky fan closed the distance, his camera thrust forward like a weapon, his followers' comments flooding his screen in a blur of emojis and exclamations. "Look at him," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "The Prince of Privilege, handing out crumbs to the poor while his father's policies starve nations. Is this your idea of charity, Barron? A photo op to cleanse the Trump name?" The words were a calculated barb designed to provoke, to strip away the calm facade Barron had so carefully maintained. The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably, unsure where to land. Barron's mind raced, his instincts screaming at him to walk away, to let the activist rant into the void. But something, pride, defiance, or perhaps a buried anger, rooted him to the spot. He removed his sunglasses, his piercing blue eyes locking onto the Zelensky fans with an intensity that made the man falter, if only for a heartbeat. "You don't know me," Barron said, his voice low and steady, each word deliberate. "You don't know what I care about or what I've done." The simplicity of the statement hung in the air, a quiet rebuttal to the activist's bombast, but it only seemed to fuel the fire. The Zelensky fan scoffed, his camera shaking slightly as he stepped closer, his followers' cheers emboldening him. "Oh, I know enough," he spat. "I know your family's history, your father's deals, the way you've all skated through life on a golden carpet while the rest of us bleed." He gestured wildly, his arms sweeping across the market, as if to encompass the entire world in his indictment. "You think a $20 bill makes you a hero. You think surfing and bonfires erase the damage your name has done." His voice cracked with emotion, the raw edge of his pain cutting through the rhetoric, a glimpse of the man beneath the zealotry. Barron's hands clenched at his sides, his knuckles white against the sun-kissed skin. He could feel the crowd's anticipation, the collective breath held as they waited for his response. The activist's words had struck a nerve, dredging up the very doubts that had plagued him for years, the inescapable shadow of his surname, the guilt by association that no act of kindness could fully dispel. But he refused to let this man, this stranger, define him. "I'm not my father," he said, his voice rising, the words carrying across the market like a declaration. "I'm not responsible for everything you hate. I'm just trying to live my life." The Zelensky fan's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise breaking through his fury. He hadn't expected resistance, not like this. His followers' comments surged, some praising his courage, others hurling insults at Barron, but the activist pressed on, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and desperation. "Live your life," he echoed, his tone mocking. "While others fight for survival, while Ukraine bleeds under the weight of your family's indifference." He thrust his phone forward, the camera inches from Barron's face, capturing every twitch, every flicker of emotion. "Say it to them," he demanded. "Tell the world how you're just living your life while they die." The market had fallen silent, the only sounds the distant crash of waves and the faint hum of drones circling overhead, their lenses trained on the unfolding drama. Barron's chest heaved, his breath shallow as he stared into the camera, the weight of the moment pressing down like a physical force. He could walk away, let the activist claim his hollow victory, but something inside him snapped, a refusal to be reduced to a symbol, to let this man's narrative overwrite his own. He leaned closer, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver through the crowd. "You want to blame me for everything wrong in the world? Fine, but don't pretend you know who I am." The Zelensky fan recoiled, his bravado wavering as Barron's words landed with the force of a blow. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling through the throng, some nodding in agreement, others scowling, the divide palpable. The activist's phone trembled in his hand, his followers' comments a chaotic blur, but he couldn't back down, not now. He opened his mouth to retort, but Barron cut him off, his voice steady, his eyes burning with a quiet ferocity. "You're not fighting for Ukraine, you're fighting for attention. And I'm not your enemy." The words hung in the air, a stark truth that stripped the confrontation bare. The Zelensky fan's face flushed, his jaw clenching as he struggled to find a response, but the momentum had shifted. Barron turned, his cap back in place, and walked away, the crowd parting before him like a sea. The activist stood frozen, his camera still rolling, capturing the moment his crusade crumbled. His followers' comments turned frantic, some urging him to chase after Barron, others conceding defeat. But he knew it was over. The market resumed its rhythm, the tension dissipating like smoke, leaving only the faint echo of what had transpired. Barron disappeared into the throng, his heart pounding, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, anger, relief, and a strange, hollow victory. He stood his ground, but the cost lingered, a bitter aftertaste that no amount of pineapple could wash away. The Zelensky fan, his phone now lowered, stared after him, his expression a mix of fury and bewilderment. The confrontation had been his gambit, his chance to reclaim the narrative, but Barron's quiet defiance had shattered it. As the market's noise swelled around him, he slipped away, his mind already racing with plans for the next move, the next strike. But for now, the beachside market returned to its sun-soaked normalcy, the clash between privilege and passion, a fleeting storm that had passed, leaving only ripples in its wake. Barron, his cap pulled low, vanished into the crowd, his silhouette swallowed by the vibrant chaos of Maui, but the digital world was just beginning to catch fire. The live stream had gone viral, the footage dissected and debated across platforms, hashtags like Barron stands and Zelensky fail trending as the story took on a life of its own. The paradise they both inhabited had become a battleground, and neither could escape the fallout. The Zelensky fan stormed into the cramped, dimly lit room he'd rented on the edge of Maui, the door slamming shut with a shudder that rattled the thin walls. He ripped off his baseball cap and flung it across the room, where it landed atop a chaotic pile of crumpled flyers, empty energy drink cans, and scattered notes. His chest heaved, each breath a jagged burst of fury and shame. The market confrontation looped in his mind like a relentless taunt, Barron Trump's towering calm, the crowd's shifting loyalty, his own voice faltering as the livestream captured every humiliating second. He snatched his phone from his pocket, hands trembling as he scrolled through the aftermath online. The comments stung. Some cheered his defiance, but too many jeered, "Owned by a Trump kid. Give it up, dude." His face flushed hot with disgrace. He couldn't let it end like this. He wouldn't. Dropping into a chair at the cluttered desk, he shoved aside a stale sandwich and yanked his laptop open. His fingers hammered the keys, drafting a furious call to action. "Join me in Maui. The Trumps think they can silence us, but we'll show them, starting with Barron. Rally at his resort. Demand accountability now." He pictured it, a march through the streets, a swelling crowd outside Barron's gilded retreat, signs blazing, voices thundering. Maybe a dramatic stunt to seize the headlines, a mock trial, a burning effigy. He hit send and responses trickled in, his core followers vowing to amplify the message, some promising to make the trip. A grim smile twisted his lips. This was his counterstrike. Across the island, Barron sat on the balcony of his resort suite, the Pacific stretching endlessly before him. The sunset bled orange and pink across the sky, but its beauty felt hollow, drowned out by the noise in his head. The market clash replayed, his steady words, the activist's venom, the crowd's judgment shifting like sand. He'd held his ground, and for a fleeting moment it had felt like a win. Now, alone, doubt gnawed at him. Had he just lit a match in a dry field? His phone buzzed incessantly, texts from his mother, alerts from news apps, a flood of social media tags. The video had gone viral, dissected by strangers who either lauded his composure or branded him a spoiled heir hiding behind his name. He raked a hand through his hair, the weight of Trump heavier than ever. A sharp knock broke his reverie. A resort staff member stood at the door, voice low and apologetic. "Mr. Trump, there are reporters downstairs. They want your comment on the market incident." Barron's gut twisted. He wanted to dodge the spotlight, but it had tracked him down. "Tell them I'm not available," he said, forcing calm into his tone. The staff member nodded and retreated, but Barron knew it was a flimsy shield. As he settled back into his chair, a rising clamor pulled him to the balcony's edge. Below, a knot of people gathered near the resort entrance, signs bobbing, voices merging into chants. No more Trumps. Justice for Ukraine. His heart sank. The Zelensky fans' retaliation was already taking root. The group swelled, their anger palpable even from a distance. Barron watched, a cocktail of frustration and defiance surging through him. He wasn't his father. He wasn't a politician or a power broker. Yet here he was, a target by blood alone. He couldn't just sit here, caged by their shouts. Grabbing his cap and sunglasses, he strode downstairs, resolve hardening with each step. As he emerged from the resort, the crowd's energy snapped toward him, a brief hush, then a roar. Signs stabbed the air. Trump legacy equals war. Barron's silence is complicity. At the forefront, the Zelensky fan shoved through, megaphone clutched like a weapon, eyes alight with vindictive glee. "This is just the beginning, Barron," he bellowed, voice booming over the chants. "You think you can walk away from what your family's done? We're here until you answer for it." The crowd erupted, a wave of sound crashing against Barron's ears. He stood tall, his 6'7" frame cutting an imposing silhouette, and took a breath to respond. Before he could, a new voice sliced through the din. "Enough!" A woman stepped forward, middle-aged, gray streaks in her hair, a quiet strength in her stance. Her sign read "Peace for All," and her tone was steady but sharp. "This isn't helping. We're here for a cause, not to hound one person." The Zelensky fan spun on her, incredulous. "He's not just one person, he's a Trump. His family's hands are stained with blood." The woman didn't flinch. "And yelling at him changes what exactly? It just turns us into the aggressors." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodded, others bristled. The activists' control wavered, the group's unity cracking. Resort security edged closer, stern-faced. "This is private property," one barked. "Disperse or we call the cops." The Zelensky fan seized the moment, voice rising. "See, they hide behind guards and walls while the world burns." The woman's words had sowed doubt. A few protesters lowered their signs, their fervor cooling. Barron saw his chance and turned back toward the resort, security forming a loose barrier as he passed through the doors. The Zelensky fan's parting shout trailed him. "We'll be back, Barron. This isn't over." Inside, the lobby's silence enveloped him, a stark contrast to the chaos. He sank into an armchair, pulse still racing. His phone lit up. "Eric this time. Saw the video. You did good. Keep your head up." Barron exhaled, but the encouragement felt thin against the storm brewing outside. A staff member approached, hesitant. "Mr. Trump, a reporter from Maui News is in the lounge. She'd like an interview." Barron waited, another intrusion, but maybe a chance to speak for himself. "All right," he said, standing. In the lounge, Lisa Chen greeted him, notepad in hand, camera crew poised. "Thanks for this, Mr. Trump. I know it's a lot right now." Her questions came fast, the market, the protest, his family's shadow. Barron kept it simple. "I'm not my father. I'm just trying to live my life, not answer for his choices." Lisa tilted her head. "But your name carries history. Do you get why that engages people?" He nodded, slow. "I do. I can't change how they feel, but I want to be judged for me, not him." She pressed further, Ukraine, his father's policies, but Barron sidestepped, honest but guarded. "I was a kid during all that. I'm not the one to ask." The interview ended, and as the crew packed up, his phone buzzed again. An unknown number. "Interviews won't save you. We're not done." The words iced his veins. A threat, vague but pointed. He stood, jaw tight. Hiding wasn't an option anymore. He needed to act, to defuse this before it exploded further. The woman from the protest, Maria Alvarez, a teacher the staff confirmed, might be a lifeline, someone reasonable in this mess. He resolved to find her, to talk, maybe find a way out. But as he stepped toward the front desk to ask more, a shadow of unease lingered. The Zelensky fan wasn't bluffing. Whatever came next, it would hit harder. Barron Trump sat in a quiet corner of the resort's cafe, the brim of his cap pulled low to shield his face, sunglasses resting on the table beside a steaming cup of coffee. The salty sea breeze drifted through the open windows, blending with the rich aroma of the brew, offering a fleeting sense of calm amidst the storm brewing in his life. He glanced at his watch. Maria Alvarez, the teacher who had challenged the Zelensky fan during the protest outside his resort, was due to arrive any moment. After the chaotic events of Part 4, Barron had reached out to her, seeing her as a potential ally or at least a voice of reason in the escalating conflict. To his relief, she had agreed to meet. His thoughts churned as he waited. The threatening message he'd received after his interview with Lisa Chen still gnawed at him. This isn't over. The words looped in his mind, a reminder that the Zelensky fan and his followers weren't backing down. Barron needed a way to defuse the situation, and Maria might hold the key. The cafe door swung open and Maria stepped inside. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on Barron. She approached with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Mr. Trump," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Maria Alvarez." Barron rose to shake her hand, his towering frame making the gesture slightly awkward in the cozy space. "Please, call me Barron. Thanks for coming." They settled into their seats, an uneasy silence stretching between them. Barron fidgeted with his coffee cup, searching for the right words. Maria broke the tension first. "I'll be honest, I was surprised you reached out. What's this about?" Barron took a deep breath. "I wanted to thank you for what you did at the protest. Standing up to that guy, it took guts." "You felt that, didn't you? That was no ordinary moment. If it hit you, hit like and let's keep going." Maria nodded slowly. "I support the cause, but not the way he's going about it. Harassing you doesn't solve anything." "That's what I've been trying to say," Barron replied, leaning forward. "I'm not my father. I've never touched politics or his businesses. I just want to live my life." Maria studied him, her gaze steady. "But you get why people are upset, don't you? Your family's name carries a lot of baggage, pain, division, controversy." Barron sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I get it. I can't escape the Trump name. But I want people to judge me for me, not for what my dad did." Her expression softened just a fraction. "That's a fair ask. Still, your privilege gives you a platform, whether you like it or not. Maybe you could use it for something good." Barron frowned, intrigued. "Like what?" "Instead of just defending yourself, speak out about what matters to you," Maria suggested. "Show people you're more than a last name." The idea hit him like a quiet revelation. "I've always tried to avoid the spotlight," he admitted. "But maybe you're right. Maybe I need to step up." Before he could say more, a commotion erupted outside the cafe. Through the window, Barron saw a crowd forming, signs bobbing, voices rising. His stomach sank as he spotted the Zelensky fan at the forefront, megaphone in hand. "Not again," Barron muttered under his breath. Maria followed his gaze and sighed. "Looks like he's not done with you." The Zelensky fan's voice blared through the megaphone, sharp and accusatory. "Barron Trump hides while the world suffers. Come out and face us, coward." Barron's jaw tightened. He couldn't keep letting this spiral. He stood, turning to Maria. "I have to deal with this." "Be careful," she warned, placing a hand on his arm. "He's baiting you." Barron nodded, grateful for her concern, and stepped outside. The tropical heat slammed into him as he approached the crowd. Their chants grew louder, signs waving like battle flags. "Trump legacy equals global shame," and "justice for Ukraine." The Zelensky fan's eyes locked onto Barron, a smug grin spreading across his face. There he is. The prince emerges from his castle. Barron stopped a few feet away, standing tall, his voice calm but firm. "What do you want from me?" The activist thrust the megaphone forward. "Accountability. Admit your family's role in the suffering of nations like Ukraine." "I've said it before, I'm not my father," Barron shot back. "I didn't make those calls." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodded, others shouted in dissent. The Zelensky fan pounced. "Then denounce him. Denounce your family's actions right now publicly." Barron's eyes narrowed. "You want me to betray my family to appease your grudge? That's not happening." The activist's face flushed with fury. "Then you're complicit. You're part of the problem." Maria, who had followed Barron outside, stepped forward. "This isn't helping anyone," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "You're not going to fix anything by screaming at him." The Zelensky fan whirled on her. "Stay out of this, traitor. You're defending a Trump." "I'm defending reason," Maria retorted, unflinching. "This isn't progress." The crowd's energy wavered. Some protesters lowered their signs, others pressed closer, their anger palpable. Barron seized the moment. "I get why you're mad, but this isn't the way. Let's talk, figure something out." The Zelensky fan laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Talk, like your father talked his way out of everything. No, we demand action." Suddenly, a young man broke from the crowd and lunged at Barron, shoving him hard. "You're a disgrace," he yelled. Barron stumbled, caught off guard. Resort security surged forward, pulling the attacker back as chaos erupted. The crowd surged. Some tried to calm the situation. Others fueled the frenzy. Barron caught the Zelensky fan's eye amidst the tumult. For a fleeting second, doubt flickered in the man's gaze, a hint that he hadn't meant for this to spiral so far. But the moment vanished. The activist raised his megaphone again. "This is what happens when you ignore the people's pain. Remember this, Barron Trump." Security dispersed the crowd and Barron retreated into the cafe, his pulse racing. Maria followed, her face etched with worry. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "You need to watch yourself." Barron nodded, still processing the chaos. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Come home, it's not safe there anymore." He stared at the screen, torn. Fleeing felt like surrender, but staying meant facing more of this madness. He couldn't run, it would only chase him. He had to confront it. Looking at Maria, he made up his mind. "I need your help. Let's find a way to handle this properly, without the shouting and the violence." Maria hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's try." As they began to brainstorm, neither noticed the Zelensky fan across the street, already planning his next, more reckless move. The conflict was far from over. The Maui Community Center was a modest, whitewashed building with wooden beams, a far cry from the luxurious resorts that lined the island's coast. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a small stage, where a podium stood bathed in the glow of fluorescent lights. The air buzzed with anticipation as a mix of locals, tourists, and reporters filled the seats. Camera crews positioned themselves at the back, their lenses fixed on the stage where Barron Trump was about to speak. Backstage, Barron peeked through a crack in the curtain, his heart thudding in his chest. Nervousness mingled with resolve as he adjusted his casual button-down shirt and khakis, chosen to make him seem approachable, not like the polished heir to a controversial dynasty. Maria Alvarez stood beside him, her presence steadying. "You've got this," she said, offering a warm smile. "Just be honest, speak from the heart." Barron nodded, exhaling deeply. "Thanks, Maria, I appreciate you being here." She squeezed his arm gently. Show them who you really are." At precisely 7:00 p.m., Barron stepped onto the stage. The room hushed, all eyes turning to him. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and began. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I know there's been a lot of tension lately, and I wanted to address it directly." He paused, scanning the audience. Some faces were open, others guarded, a few openly hostile. "I'm Barron Trump, but I'm not here as a representative of my family or their legacy. I'm here as myself, a 19-year-old who loves Maui and wants to be part of this community." He spoke of his passion for surfing, his admiration for the island's culture, and his interest in supporting local efforts like beach cleanups and youth programs. "I get that my last name comes with baggage," he admitted. "I can't change that, but I can choose how I live my life. I want to be judged on my actions, not my father's." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others crossed their arms skeptically. Barron opened the floor to questions. A reporter pressed him about his father's policies, but he deflected. "I'm not here to talk politics. That's not my world." Then, the doors at the back of the hall swung open with a bang. The Zelensky fan strode in, followed by a dozen protesters wielding signs and wearing shirts emblazoned with Ukrainian flags. The room tensed as security moved to block them, but Barron raised a hand. "Let them in," he said firmly. "If they have something to say, let's hear it." The Zelensky fan approached the stage, a folder clutched tightly in his hand. His eyes burned with intensity as he faced Barron. "Barron Trump, you claim to be different, but you're still hiding behind your privilege," he declared, his voice cutting through the silence. "Your family has caused real harm, and you need to own it." Barron met his gaze steadily. "I'm listening. What do you want to say?" The fan opened the folder and held up a photograph for the audience to see. A family standing in front of a house, an eviction notice plastered on the door. "This is my family," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We lost our home because of a Trump real estate development. Your father's company bulldozed our neighborhood to build luxury condos. We were left with nothing." Gasps echoed through the room. Barron's face drained of color. He hadn't known about this. The fan continued, displaying more photos, his parents in tears, their belongings stuffed into boxes on the curb. "I was a kid, just like you were during your father's presidency. But unlike you, I didn't have a golden safety net. We struggled for years because of what your family did." Barron swallowed hard, his mind racing. "I'm truly sorry for what happened to your family. I had no idea, but I wasn't involved in that. I was a child." The Zelensky fan's eyes narrowed. "Then use your voice now. Denounce what your father did. Make it right." "I can't denounce my father," Barron replied, his tone steady but laced with pain. "He's my family, but I can promise to do better to help where I can." "That's not enough," a protester shouted from the crowd. "You need to pay for what your family did." Suddenly, a water bottle flew through the air, striking Barron square in the chest. Cold water splashed across his shirt, and the bottle clattered to the stage floor. The room exploded into chaos. Security lunged forward, tackling the thrower as protesters surged toward the stage, shouting. Maria grabbed Barron's arm, pulling him back. "We need to go," she urged, her voice urgent. Barron, dazed, let her guide him off stage. His soaked shirt clung to his skin, and his thoughts spun from the revelation and the sudden attack. Behind them, the Zelensky fan stood amidst the turmoil, his expression a mix of triumph and unease. He hadn't intended for violence, but the anger had spiraled beyond his control. As Barron and Maria slipped out a side door, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "Barron, any comment on the incident? Will you press charges?" Barron paused, glancing back at the chaos inside. "I just want peace," he said, his voice nearly lost in the clamor. "I want to find a way forward." But his words were drowned out by the noise. The story was already slipping from his grasp. Later, back at his resort, Barron sat in front of his laptop, watching the news coverage unfold. Headlines blared. Violence erupts at Trump event in Maui, and Barron Trump attacked by protester. The clip of the water bottle hitting him played on a loop, amplifying the drama. His phone buzzed relentlessly. His mother's text read, "Please come home, it's too dangerous." His brother Donald Jr. wrote, "Don't let them bully you, stand strong." Barron felt trapped. Leaving Maui now would look like he was fleeing, admitting defeat. Staying meant facing more confrontations, possibly worse than this. He needed a new approach. He replayed the Zelensky fan story in his mind. Maybe there was a way to address it, to investigate that old development deal and see if he could help those affected without betraying his family. But first, he needed to talk to the fan directly, away from the chaos. With Maria's help, he tracked down a mutual contact and sent a message. "I'd like to meet, just you and me. No cameras, no crowds, can we talk?" Hours later, a reply came. "I'll meet, but no tricks, just us." Barron agreed, suggesting a quiet beach at dawn as the location. As he prepared for the meeting, a sense of unease settled over him. This could be a turning point, for better or worse, he was about to find out. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the Maui sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Barron Trump stood at the edge of a secluded beach, the rhythmic crash of waves filling the quiet morning air. He'd chosen this spot for its privacy, far from the resorts, the protesters, and the prying eyes of the media. His hands were stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie, his breath visible in the cool breeze as he waited. After the chaos of the public forum confrontation in Part 6, Barron had reached out to the Zelensky fan for this private meeting, hoping to understand the root of the man's relentless anger. Footsteps crunched softly on the sand behind him. Barron turned to see the fan approaching, his wiry frame silhouetted against the rising sun. He wore a faded jacket, the Ukrainian flag patch on his sleeve catching the light. His face was drawn, the fire in his eyes dimmed by exhaustion or perhaps something deeper. He stopped a few feet away, hands shoved in his pockets, mirroring Barron's stance. "Thanks for coming," Barron said, his voice steady but cautious. "I thought we could talk, really talk, without all the noise." The fan nodded, his gaze drifting to the ocean. "Yeah, I'm tired of the shouting." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their past encounters hanging between them. Barron took a breath, deciding to cut to the point. "At the forum, you showed me those pictures, your family, the eviction. I didn't know about that. I'm sorry for what happened to you." The fan's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he bent down, picked up a small shell and turned it over in his hand. "It's not just about the eviction," he said finally, his voice low. "That was the start, but it's not the whole story." Barron frowned, sensing a shift. "What do you mean?" The fan exhaled sharply, as if the words were painful to release. "I'm not who you think I am. This whole Zelensky fan thing, it's not really about Ukraine. Not entirely." Barron blinked, caught off guard. "What?" The man dropped the shell and met Barron's gaze, his expression a mix of shame and defiance. "I needed a cause, something big, something that would get attention. Ukraine's fight, Zelensky's story, it's powerful. People listen when you tie your pain to something like that. But for me, it was always about my family, about what your father's company did to us." Barron's mind raced, trying to process the revelation. "So, you're saying you used the Ukraine cause as a platform?" "Yeah," the fan admitted, his voice rough. "After we lost our home, my parents never recovered. My dad drank himself into an early grave. My mom worked 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. I grew up angry, watching my family fall apart while yours thrived. I wanted someone to pay for that." Barron felt a pang of empathy, but also confusion. Why didn't you just say that from the start? Why hide behind the Zelensky stuff? The fan laughed bitterly. "Because no one cares about one family's eviction story. It's old news, but tie it to a global crisis. Suddenly, you've got a movement, people listen. They rally. I thought if I could make enough noise, maybe I'd finally get some justice, or at least make your family feel a fraction of the pain mine did." Barron stared at him, the weight of the man's words settling in. "So, all the protests, the megaphone, the forum, it was never really about Ukraine for you. It was personal." The fan nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Yeah, and I know that makes me a fraud, but I was desperate. I've been carrying this anger for so long, and when I saw you here, living this carefree life, it broke something in me." Barron took a step closer, his voice soft but firm. "I get it. I do. But I'm not the one who made those decisions. I was a kid when that happened, just like you were." "I know," the fan said, his voice cracking. "And that's the worst part. I've been raging at you, but you're not the villain here. You're just caught in the same storm I am, in a different way." The two stood in silence, the waves lapping at the shore as the sun climbed higher. Barron's mind churned. He'd expected another ideological clash, not this raw, personal confession. It was like seeing the man for the first time, stripped of the armor he'd built around himself. I can't undo what happened to your family, Barron said quietly. But maybe I can help now. Not as a Trump, not as some PR move, just as me. The fan looked at him, skepticism flickering in his eyes. How? Barron thought for a moment. I've got resources, connections. I could look into what happened with that development deal, see if there's any way to make things right for the families affected. It won't fix the past, but it's something. The fan's gaze softened, the fight draining from him. You do that? Yeah, Barron said, surprising even himself with the certainty in his voice. I would. For the first time, the fan smiled, a small, weary thing, but genuine. I didn't expect that. I thought you'd just tell me to get lost. Barron shrugged. I'm not my father. I don't want to be the guy who walks away from problems. If I can help, I will. The fan extended a hand, hesitant at first, then firmer. I'm Alex, by the way, Alex Reyes. Barron shook his hand, the gesture feeling like a truce. Barron. They stood there, hands clasped for a moment longer than necessary, as if sealing an unspoken agreement. When they finally let go, Alex glanced back at the ocean, his expression thoughtful. I'll stop the protests, he said. No more megaphones, no more stunts, but I'll hold you to that promise. Barron nodded, fair enough. As they walked back up the beach together, the first rays of sunlight warmed the sand beneath their feet. The tension that had gripped them for days seemed to dissolve with the morning mist, replaced by something fragile but hopeful. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Too much history lay between them for that. But it was a start. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. That way you'll never miss our newest uploads.